Hello friends, welcome back to TechnoGeek SFDC. And in this session, we are going to talk about Apex in Salesforce. So you must have heard many times this terminology called Apex. But what is Apex? Okay, so Apex is basically a programming language which is being introduced in Salesforce so that a developer can write some code in the backend to do the execution or to do the business processes. Okay, which will directly run on the Salesforce servers. Okay, so this was the use of Apex. So in simple terms, if I say it is kind of a programming language which allows user to extend the functionalities of the Salesforce. Okay, or let's say some business requirement comes in and you see that, or any analyst or any developer sees that it cannot be done by out of the box Salesforce features. We know Salesforce provides a lot of out of the box features, but since the world is growing, technology is growing, requirements are growing. So in that cases, sometimes you can face that it cannot be done by out of the box. Then how to achieve that? You cannot make it as a showstopper, right? So to allow people or to allow developers to make that business logic in backend, even if it is not possible by out of the box features, Salesforce introduced a programming language called Apex, okay, which is a strongly typed programming language on the Salesforce server. So whatever the code you write, it executes directly on the Salesforce servers. So why we need Apex? Okay, so as we were discussing that there were many scenarios where you get some business requirement which cannot be done by out of the box. Okay, so let's say you want to do some integration. You know that since businesses are growing in multiple areas and they have multiple systems which needs to talk to each other to provide a seamless experiences, that's where integration comes in picture, and that's where your Apex plays a major role in Salesforce so that you can connect one system with another system. Similarly, we have something called email services. You might be knowing email to case and all, right? But let's say if you want to do certain functionalities which is not supported by email to case. Let's take an example that as soon as an email comes in, you want to create a record in a separate object, not on the case. Then how to achieve that? So in these types of scenarios, you will be using Apex, okay? Or if you want to work on some bulk data manipulation, or if you have some business logics which you are not able to write in flows or any other out of the box features, that's where you write Apex, okay? And that's where you need Apex. And Apex, you can say it's a widely used programming language in Salesforce ecosystem, okay? Now, what is Apex class basically? So whenever you heard a term called Apex, you must be thinking like how I can write the Apex or how it will. So Apex is nothing but your Apex classes. Okay. So what is Apex class? Apex class is basically a collection of methods and variables which will be used to perform your business logic. Okay. Or you can say it is a kind of template. So what does that mean? Okay, in terms, let's say if I'm telling a template. So, for example, you have application 1 and you have application 2. You have created some Apex class and you have written some code in that to perform some business logic. Okay. Now, application 1 also wants to use this logic and application 2 also wants to use this logic. So what in backend system do? It creates the instances of this particular blueprint, okay, which we are calling it as blueprint. It creates the instances. So let's say if application 1 is using this particular Apex class to perform the business logic, it creates an instance and assign to application 1. Similarly, if application 2 wants to use it, it creates an instance and it provides to application 2, so that this particular or same Apex class can be used can be used by multiple application. So in simple terms, if you want to understand, in simple terms, Apex class is just a collection of methods and variables which is used to create the business logic which will run on the system. Okay. Now, Apex class or whatever the code you write in Apex class, that is very much similar to Java. So if you have a Java background, it you can easily understand that, but it is more of a Java syntaxes, you can say, or if you will see the code, you will, and if you have a Java background, you can easily correlate. Okay. Now, let's see how we can write an Apex class. Okay. Now, so to write an Apex class in Salesforce, okay, how we can start writing the class. So to define an Apex class first, what we need to do is we need to first provide the modifier, like you're seeing here, public, private, global, and then there are certain other concepts like virtual abstract with sharing, without sharing. So about these we will discuss later, but the basic modifiers we will see. So we have something called private, public, or global. So what does private mean? Private is basically the telling that this class can only be executed in the current scope, or current scope means it from the outer class where this class is being called, it it can only be referred in that class. It cannot be referred from anywhere outside the class. Okay. Now, next is your public. So what does public means? Public tells that this class can be called from anywhere in the Salesforce system of the same namespace. So let's say you have your sandbox, okay, or you have one production org called, let's say, some DL production, okay. So whatever class you are giving with a modifier as public, this can be called from anywhere in the DL uh, sandbox or DL production instance with the with this namespace as DL within the Salesforce. Okay, so it is not only restricted to the class, but it can be referred by any other class as well, or any other process which is in the same production, which is in the same org. Last is your global. Okay, global means this class can be referred from anywhere. It can be referred from outside the Salesforce org. I mean, if let's say you have some other Salesforce org that can also use this class, or if you have, or you can use this class in the same Salesforce instance or same Salesforce org as well. Okay, then you have a keyword called class, and then you provide the class name. So if we see and sample, so let's start writing a class. Okay, so as we discussed, first we need to give the modifier whether it has to be private, public, or global. Okay, so based on your requirement, global basically we use, let's say if we are writing any web services or something like that, usually in those scenarios we use the global. Okay, so let's say I'll take it as a public. So this is my first modifier. Then, as I mentioned, we need to provide the keyword called class, and then you will we have you will give a user friendly name to the class. So let's say I'll give as my first class. Okay, now this we have give. So this is how we define the Apex class, and then you have a curly braces, open and close curly braces. Okay, so this is your Apex class which you have defined here. Okay, there is one more interesting thing which maybe we will discuss later, that is with sharing or without sharing keyword. Okay, so this also we can include here, like you can give as with sharing, or you can give without sharing. Okay, this we can discuss further in our next sessions, but this is also one of the important keywords which we use in the class. If we don't give anything, then by default system consider it as without sharing. Okay, so this is the basic sample of creating the Apex class. So we have created the Apex class. Okay, but this is a blank class. There is nothing into it. It's just a, you can say it's just an envelope. There is nothing into it. So now, if we have to perform further things, we need Apex variables and we need Apex methods. Okay, so what is Apex variable? Apex variables are variables, basically they are used to store information in Apex class on a temporary basis. Okay, what does that mean? That let's say you have a class and you have some business logic where, let's say you are capturing the first name and adding some value, adding last name into it, and updating into the system. So in that case, okay, you need some places where you can temporarily capture the first name, and then you can temporarily store the concatenation of first name and last name, right? So where you will store? These storage places are known as variables in Salesforce. Okay. Now, how do we define the variable? So we have again modifiers like we have public, private, protected, and global. So we can give any one of them. Okay. Then we can give a keyword like final. Final means whatever the value you have given, that is the final, you cannot modify it further. Then you have another keyword called static. About static and non-static difference, we will again discuss in our going forward sessions. And then you need to provide the data type. So what is a data type? So data type defines that what type of value this variable can store. Okay. So data type can be your primitive data types like string, integer, double, date time. It can be an S object, it can be a collections, it can be a instance of inner class or user defined Apex classes, and it can be some system defined classes. So for example, let's say if I'm mentioning data type as string for a let's say I'm defining a string for a variable. Okay, then I cannot store integer into it, or I cannot store double into it, I cannot store a date into it. So whatever, so data type is defining that what type of data you can store in that variable. And then next is your variable name. Okay, so till now I think here it is clear. Okay, so how we will define this in our class? So as we were discussing, as you mentioned, first we have to provide the modifier like public, private, global, or protected. So let's say I'll give here as public, then data type. So I'll give it as string. Okay, this is my data type. We can give it here as integer or anything. Okay, one variable can have only one data type. It cannot have multiple data types. Okay, we ha then we will give the variable name. So let's say I'll give my name. Okay, now there is something called get and set value into this. So what this get or set do? It is similar to getter setter in Java what we have, right? So what get do is get basically return. So let's say if you want to use the value which is stored in my name, okay, in somewhere else or anywhere, that's where your getter methods comes into picture, where you can get the value which is being stored in the variable. Similarly, set, what it do? Set basically sets the value, or it can provide a new value to the variable. Okay. So this is how we define the variables. You can define as many variables as you want. So let's say I can define like public integer my age. Okay. Get set. Similarly, public date time, today's date. Okay. So you can go on adding the variables into your class. Okay, and now whatever the variables you are adding outside a method, or whatever the variable you are creating outside a method, the scope of these variable, or what do you mean by scope? So scope is basically where all you can access these variables. Okay, so let's say if you are defining any variable into the method, then the scope of that particular variable is only till that method. So as soon as the method execution is over, the variable will be deleted from the memory of the Apex class. But if the variable is defined on the top level, then then if the method execution is finished, still the variable will be present in the memory of the Apex class. We will discuss about this in more detail to give you a better understanding of how the variables and other what is the scope, how the scope of the variable plays a major role. Okay, so this is where we have created the variable. Next is method. Okay, so what is a method? Method is actually your collection of lines of code which will basically do the business logic, or whatever the logic you want to perform, or if you want to do some processing data like insert, update, delete, all these things. So these will be done into methods. Okay, you cannot write any line of code or any line of code directly in the class. It has to be in a method. Okay. Now, how we define the method? Okay. So first thing is, again, we need to use the modifiers. Okay. Modifiers, and then we can either use override or static. So override or static we will discuss again when we will be talking about the oops concept. We will discuss in detail there. Okay. Then we have something called return type. Okay, in the method. So return type, what it do is it specifies that what type of data this method will return at the end of the execution. Okay, that is called a return type. Again, return type can be of any data type. It can be a collection, it can be a primitive data type like your string, integer, date, time. It can again an instance of a user defined Apex class, or it can be an S object, it can be an object type. So return type can be anything. Okay, then comes your method name, and after that, whatever you after that you must be noticing we have something called input parameters. So what input parameters are? Input parameters are those parameters which will be used to drive your business logic. So let's say, for example, let's say we have written a method, okay, where we need to process first name, last name, okay, but to process first name last name we need to get the first name last name, right? Then only we can process it. So these first name last name can be passed as an input parameter to the method. So we are giving this input to the method so that the method can do the processing efficiently as per the code. Okay, and then you have the body of the method. So let's see how we can basically define here. Okay, so again, similar to uh, what we have seen, that we need the modifiers first. So let's say I'll again use public. Public, now return type. So return type can, as we discussed, it can be anything, primitive data type or anything. It can also be void. So void means that you are not returning anything from that Apex class or Apex method, sorry. Okay, so you are doing the business logic, you are doing everything, but you are not returning anything from the Apex method. Okay, so void also we will see. We will first see how we can use the data type. So let's say I'm giving the return type as data type, return type as string. Okay, and then I'll see. Let's say I'll use name modification. Okay, so this is my method name. Name modification is my method name. Okay, now I can pass the input parameter. Okay, so input parameter will be how it defines. For defining input parameter, you need to first give what is the data type of that variable what you are giving, or the input what you are giving, and the variable name which will be storing the information which you are sending in the input. Okay, so let's say I am giving here as last name. Okay, so this is the so last name will be having the value which I am passing in this method. We will see this how this is going to work. Okay, now let's say so this is how we define the method. Okay, and then you have the body here where you will be doing the processings. Okay, after that, since we have a return type here, we need a return statement here, something called return, and then the value which you are returning. Okay, so after processing, the value which you are returning should match this type, this data type. Okay, so I cannot return integer here. Okay, it will not allow you to save, it will give a compilation error. Instead, I can just give the string data type. Okay, because my return type is string and the data type of this variable is string. So these two should match when you are using a return type in the Apex method. Okay, now let's see how we can use it. Okay, so we have defined the variable here. Okay, using the getter setter. And then we have something called my name equals demo space plus, and then we are adding the last name. Okay, and then I am just returning my name. So what this is doing, it is basically adding the value what you are passing in the method, concatenating it with the demo. Okay, and then it will return you. Okay, so this is the class which we have created. So currently we have created in our notepad, but how we will use it in the Salesforce? So for that we need to first create the class in Salesforce. How we can create? For that you can come to setup, you can type Apex classes, and then you have something called new here. You can click on new. I'll just copy this and I'll paste here. You can do a quick save to see if any kind of compilation error is coming here or anything like that. So if any error will come, you will see the error in red here. Okay. So as I was discussing, our return type and the return value, I mean whatever we are returning, that should be same, right? Let's say if you are giving age as integer, age as return here. Okay. If I try to save, it will not allow. Why? Because my return type is string, but I am returning here an integer, which is not allowed. So it should be same. Now we have created the class now. Okay, but how to use it? Okay, or let's say if I want to execute and see the outcome of this, so how can we do that? So there are multiple ways. You can call one method from another, or you can call from process builder or from VF page or from anywhere. Okay, so just for a demo purpose here, we will use developer console. Okay, so developer console, again, it's a code creation platform provided by Salesforce, or for developers basically, where they can come and they can create Apex classes, Lightning components, and other stuffs. Okay. Now in this, let's say you have some Apex class and you just want to execute it. So we have something called anonymous window. Okay. In anonymous window, whatever the code you are writing, that will not be stored in the Salesforce. So these are the temporary codes which you can run to just see the outcomes, basically for your business logic. These will not be stored on your Salesforce servers. Okay. Now, as we were discussing, so let's say developer console is one application who wants to use this particular um, Apex class or Apex class method. Okay. Now, what we do, we create an instance of this class. So how we create the instance? For that, we give, so this will be your class name first, and then a local name or a user-friendly name you can give. So I'll give here just demo check equals new, and again class name followed by method. So what it is doing this, but so it has created an instance of the class and assigned it to the demo check variable. Or in simple terms, basically you are creating a variable of type class, user defined class. Okay. Now, if I want to execute a method, then how we will do? Okay. So for that, I will use the variable name now. I will not use the class name. I'll use the variable name. Okay. Followed. Okay. I think I have written a little bit different. It has to be class name. Sorry. And then I'll give the method name here. Okay. Now, since we have an input parameter, you need to pass a string here. So how we pass a string? We give the single quotes and then we can give the value into it. So this will be considered as string here. Okay. And then followed by semicolon. So semicolon basically tells that this is the end of your this line of code. Okay, this line. At the end of any line, whatever you're writing, semicolon is mandatory. Okay. Now, so we have demo check and we are doing. So as you might have seen that we are returning a variable as well here. Okay. So this method is returning the variable, but how to store that variable or how to store and see what is the outcome of this method or whatever the business logic we have written, what is the outcome of that? For that, we will write outcome check equals. So we have defined a outcome check of type string, okay, because our return type is string here. So we have created a string variable called outcome check, and then we are just executing this particular method with an input parameter, okay, and then we can use system.debug uh, outcome check to see if the business logic has been performed as per our expectation. Okay, so system.debug is basically a way of capturing the log during the runtime so that whether the execution is happening as per your expectation or not. Okay, for checking the system.debug values, we use basically debug logs. We will talk about debug logs in more detail as well. Okay, now I will now execute this. So you can in the anonymous window you have something called execute and execute highlighted. Okay, so if you select like this, okay, and you click on execute highlighted, then whatever the section or whatever the lines you have selected, only that will execute. If you will directly click on execute, it will run all the class whatever is present in this editor here. Okay, and then you have something called open log, so it will automatically open a log which will be generated after the execution of this code. So I'll just click on execute, okay, and we'll see in the debug log what is the outcome. So as you see, we have written a logic here that whatever the input we are passing, it should add the demo in front of it. And now after execution of it, as you remember, I have provided the input as Alok and the outcome has come as demo Alok. Okay, so this was a simple class here which we have seen, and to give you an overview of what classes are, what are the methods, what are the variables basically, and what is the return types and how you can use them. So this is a very simple class, but definitely you can use in many other processes. In next sessions, we'll talk more deep into the Apex side and the customization side, where we will talk about what is the collection, what is the wrapper class, what are the synchronous, asynchronous Apex triggers, and all these stuffs. So we will check, we will go deep dive into everything, and we will also do a hands-on coding so that it will be more beneficial and more user-friendly to you. Now, we have seen what is Apex class, what is methods, what is variables. But how does this Apex works? Okay. So whenever you write any class, like what we have written just now, okay, whenever you write a class and store it on the Salesforce platform, okay, what basically, so we have something called Apex compiler and Apex runtime, okay, on the application server. Now, whenever you write a Apex class and click on save, so Apex compiler basically compiles your code, or it basically read your code and convert it into a set of instructions. Okay, it will create a set of instruction, and those instructions will be stored in the form of a metadata in Salesforce or in the server. Okay, then let's say any person or any event is executing that particular code, like what we did from our anonymous window, right? Then what happens is Apex compiler comes, okay, and whatever the Apex runtime is there, it will check the instructions which has been created by the compiler after reading that class. It will check the instructions, and it will send that instructions to the Salesforce database, and it will do the operation, and it will return you the value. Okay. So here basically we have something called Apex compiler and Apex runtime. The job of compiler is to compile or basically create set of instructions from the code which you have written, and then the runtime basically reads that instructions, or it basically reads the instruction and executes on the Salesforce server, and then it returns you the value, or if it is a void then it will not return, but it basically executes the instructions on the Salesforce server. So this is how Apex works in the system. Okay. As a user, as an end user, as a developer, you will not see much differences whenever you will be executing it. It's just that how Salesforce is processing it in the backend. Okay. So with this, we will wrap up today's video. I hope you enjoyed the video. You got some fair idea of what Apex classes are, what variables are, what methods are, and how we can create a simple method which we have seen as a demo. Going forward, in our further videos, we will see more advanced topics in the Apex classes. Okay. Till then, thank you. Thanks for your time, and please do subscribe the channel. Thanks for your time.